Hello, and welcome back to Think Yourself Healthy podcast. I'm your host, Heather Barbieri. Before we dive into this episode, I just want to remind you that if you take a screenshot that you're listening and tag us on Instagram, we'll send you a 15% off discount for the 8-week Retrain Your Brain program. Just take a screenshot and tag me at Heather Barbieri RDN. Thanks for listening, and let's get right to it. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to 2023 edition of Think Yourself Healthy. Super excited to have special guest Rick Olderman with us today. He is a sports and orthopedic physical therapist with more than 25 years of experience and specializes in helping people with chronic pain experience a pain-free life. Wow, that is quite the feat that you have taken upon yourself.
Yeah, it's due to necessity because there's so many people out there with chronic pain.
Yeah, absolutely. I think chronic pain tends to be probably one of the most prevalent conditions that most people are suffering with on a daily basis. And this can really lead to a plethora of other, concerns, conditions for individuals, specifically really wearing on mental health when it comes to chronic pain issues. So I'm really excited to have an opportunity to chat with you. So thank you so much for being with us today, Rick. And take a second to just kind of introduce yourself to the audience, tell them who you are and what qualifies you to be able to talk about a pain-free life.
Yeah, well, gosh, Heather, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you too. So I graduated, a little more than 25 years ago from PT school. And I soon realized, excuse me, that I worked at a small orthopedic clinic in southwestern Colorado. And I soon realized that I did not have the tools to help anyone who had any kind of chronic pain more than 3 or 4 months. It's like all the laws of treatment changed. So acute issues, in medicine, we rely on people's internal abilities to heal. If you cut your finger, the skin, heals, or if you break a bone, that mends. And with acute issues, we rely heavily on those processes in medicine. But after all of those things have healed, if you're having pain beyond that, we're kind of scratching our heads as to what's going on and kind of throwing things against the wall to see what works. And so being basically the only therapist in that town and being a failure at helping people with chronic pain, I was ashamed to even show my face in public because I didn't, because I just felt like I was such a failure. And I almost quit physical therapy. It sunk me into a deep depression for a couple of years until I realized that it wasn't just me that wasn't helping people with chronic pain. It was just about everybody. And so I moved here to Denver, worked at a really high-end health club, and my schedule was almost instantly filled with people with chronic pain. And these were people in their 30s to 50s, well-to-do, could afford and have seen everyone, and no one had been able to help them. I'm just like, we must be getting something wrong here in medicine if there are so many people walking around with chronic pain, so that's when I just realized, I've got to figure this out. And so I just really stepped back and rethought what we understand about pain. And that's when I started unraveling all of this and putting this together over the last 25 years.
Oh, exciting. Well, I'm definitely interested to pick your brain and discover what the pillars are that you have, pinpointed as contributors to this chronic pain that is such a prevalent condition amongst society. I specialize with individuals suffering, mental health as well as substance use. And it's really interesting to see the correlation of individuals who had some form of sports injury or an accident, some sort of acute trauma situation that led to the use of pain medications that then ended up turning into bigger addictive problems. And many people, once they start the pain medications, they have difficulty with being able to get off them or just manage that in itself. So let's chat.
Yeah. So, pain medications, I don't think anyone starts taking pain medications thinking, hey, man, I think I want to become addicted to these. you know? And I feel like a lot of people continue to take pain medications largely because their pain has not been resolved yet. So if a lot of people are afraid to go off pain medications because of the pain that they're going to experience if they're off of them.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've had a couple patients over the years sent to me by doctors who these patients were addicted to pain meds, and we solved their pain, but they stopped coming in because then they were faced with the idea of foregoing their pain meds. But a lot of cases, that's not the case for a lot of these people. A lot of these people aren't getting the answers that they need. And that's why they continue, because they don't want to feel pain. No one wants to feel pain.
Right.
And I think it's interesting, Heather, that you mentioned the pillars of pain. And over the years, I've come up with a theory, an overriding theory about, you know, there are three main pillars causing most chronic pain. So we all have some threshold above which we experience pain. And so there seems to be, in my opinion, three things that push us up to that threshold and beyond it. One is musculoskeletal issues, which is what I specialize in. Another is dietary, allergens, mold, things that we ingest in some way or breathe in. And the third is psychological, emotional, or spiritual issues. So some people have a combination of all three in different proportions. Some people are mostly musculoskeletal pain. But I think these, the psychological and dietary issues help create an inflammatory state in the body, or at least a tension state in the body. And that tension seems to be occurring along certain patterns within the body that are pretty common across most pain profiles. So that's my basic theory. And that's why we have so many books about, you know, this or that or whatever has solved my pain. Well, they all work. And same with treatments. They all work because they're honing in on one of those three pillars of those people's pain.
Right. I love that you just mentioned that there are many different avenues that can be taken to come to the same conclusion of a pain-free life. And I find that that's pretty common for most of our health ailments. You know, especially as a practicing dietitian, people are constantly, you know, asking, oh, what's the best diet? Well, the reality is that there is no perfect diet for one individual. Everyone has very individualized needs. And so what may work for one isn't necessarily going to be the best approach for the other. So really taking the time to get to know individuals, what's going on in their life and their lifestyle habits can be so important at helping to, you know, construct some sort of solution plan to help get them towards that pain-free life. So I love the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. To speak to that even more, you know, even physically from an anatomical standpoint, there is so much variety from person to person. Some people have 6 lumbar vertebrae. Some people just have 5. Some have 4. Other people have extra muscles here and there in their body, and the origins and insertions of those muscles vary. So there's so much variety. So it only makes sense that our internal chemistry is also varied. And our brain response to all of this is also varied because our brains are individuals too.
Right.
So, you know, that's why you got to keep looking.
Yeah. So an individual who's suffering with chronic pain, this has kind of become their norm, right? These individuals really attach to these diagnoses of chronic pain and basically having to alter their daily life habits based upon how they wake up, how they feel that day. And this can be a challenge for many people. I know for myself, this is something that I've been struggling with over the last year since getting COVID and having to completely rehab due to long COVID circumstances. And the increased inflammation that I've had in my body from these spiked proteins have led to a plethora of issues, one of them being malnutrition, specifically impacting my vitamin D. My most recent vitamin D came back as an 11, which is very, very low, critically low. And as a result of having this very low vitamin D, it's impacting my bones. I'm having pain in my bones and in my joints like I've never experienced before. So for an individual like myself who is already, really paying attention to the diet, to the stress management, what kind of things can I be doing to help resolve this underlying, which I'm hoping is an acute situation that doesn't turn into a more chronic circumstance? So as a professional, what are your thoughts?
So I'm going to back up to answer that question just a little bit, in that fundamentally, how we're trained in medicine does not address chronic issues. And here's why. So the gold standard for inclusion in medical research are double-blind studies. And in double-blind studies, what happens is they have to isolate portions of the body in order to study that joint, that cell, that muscle tissue, whatever, that pharmacological agent that they're testing. You have to be able to isolate it and test it to know what effect your intervention is having. So things that can't fit that mold of type of research aren't included in research and therefore aren't found by other practitioners. The way that we're trained in physical therapy school is to think, okay, shoulder joint pain. Okay, let's look at that shoulder joint and see what tissues could possibly be hurting there, or back pain or whatever. And so we're taught 1,000 different tests to identify what specific tissue is damaged or injured. There are 0 tests that identify why those tissues are damaged or injured. And so the whys are found not in this component thinking approach that we're trained in, but a systems approach that I've developed over these past 25 years, because I've had to barely back out and look at and think about our body, how it operates as a system musculoskeletally, rather than just these component ideas. So those people who you mentioned at the beginning of your question who are dealing with chronic pain, all of their practitioners are looking at them from a fundamentally different perspective than I would look at them at. And that's why, in medicine, the more people have been around a lot of different practitioners, it's a red flag, right? You're like, oh, this is going to be a really difficult person to help. Absolutely the opposite when people would walk into my clinic, because I knew exactly how they've been looked at prior to seeing me. And I knew that they were going to respond to a systems point of view. And so really, this is to me, in my experience with dealing with chronic pain, this is what people have been missing. And that's why I never lose hope for people with chronic pain, because they haven't tried a systems approach yet. And so the component thinking approach that we're trained in works really well for acute issues, right? But it's just not applicable to chronic issues.
Right.
That's why there are chronic issues, because they haven't been addressed as systems issues.
Right. I love the fact that you use this example of the system. The truth is that we're really being compartmentalized. We're being looked at as a machine that has individual parts, and we can focus on the part and that should fix the problem. But the reality is that these are very integrated systems. They're all connected. We can't just look at one part without taking into consideration how whatever that modality is going to potentially have an impact on another part of the system.
Exactly. And here's the thing. It may sound like, oh gosh, a systems approach, that's going to be really complicated. No, it simplifies things. When you understand how it all works as a system, it's like throwing a pebble in a pond and getting the ripple effect throughout the whole system of that pond.
Right.
That's what solving pain from a systems approach does. Small changes make enormous differences in the body. And so if you want, for instance, one of the most common types of chronic pain is back pain. If you want, I can take you through a little example of what exactly I'm talking about.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so most people experience at some time in their life chronic back pain. And if you have this now, if you're wrestling with chronic back or sciatic pain, do this test I'm about to take you through, because it's going to help you understand a fundamental cause of your back pain. So we're going to have everyone lie down on their backs on the floor. And I say the floor because a firm surface is better than a soft surface.
Okay.
But if you're the type of person who can't get on the floor, then go ahead and do it on your couch, do it on your bed. It doesn't matter. Just do the test. Lie down on the floor on your back with your legs straight. And even just take your hand and put it underneath your low back a little bit and feel the space underneath that low back. Get a sense for how comfortable or uncomfortable your back is, the tension that you're feeling in that back right now. Okay, now that you've done that, now I want you to bend your knees so your feet are flat on the floor. And you should feel a change in the discomfort in your back. It should be, well, actually 99% of the people will say that it feels better. And if you don't feel a change, then go ahead and hug those knees up to your chest and hold them with your hands and see if your back feels better like this. Chances are almost everyone listening to me will say, oh yeah, my back feels a lot better when my knees are bent than when they're straight. Okay, so what's the difference between these two positions? Well, one is that when your legs are straight, your back is more arched, and therefore your back is hurting more. When your knees are bent, your back is flatter and therefore is hurting less. But that's not the whole picture. So we're going to give you one more part of this test so you can understand really what's going on here. So now everyone stand up and listen to the rest of this podcast. And I want you to notice that once you stand up, if you've listened for maybe a minute or two, you'll notice that your knees are starting to lock backwards. Okay? This is an energy conservation move. Now we don't have to use our muscles to hold us up. Now we just get to use our joints. So notice that this is probably happening in you. And if it's not happening in both knees, it's probably happening in one, where you're shifting from one leg to the other, right? And locking that knee out. So now let's go ahead and if you're not doing it, go ahead and lock your knees, all right? And feel what your back feels like in this position. Now I want you to just suddenly unlock your knees. You don't have to squat, but just unlock them and feel what just happened to your back there. And if you're not sure, lock your knees one more time, and you'll feel that when your knees are locking, you're arching your back. Okay, so what have we learned here? We've learned that when your back is arched, it doesn't feel as good. All right. And when your knees are bent, it feels better. And we've also learned that when you stand, if you stand for anything longer than a minute or two, you're locking your knees out to conserve energy. And this is likely happening when you're walking too. Most people walk with locked knees.
Oh, interesting.
So, and when we lock our knees, our back arches more. So this is how something that is an unconscious behavior that we have adopted is feeding our back pain. So what I have for people with this pattern of pain, what I get them to do is just unlock their knees for 2 or 3 days. I'll put a little piece of tape on the backs of their knees to remind them.
Okay.
And so in 2 or 3 days, you would be surprised that probably 50% of back pain has disappeared just by unlocking the knees from this simple equation. All right. So this is what a systems approach is looking at. It's not only looking at the tissue. I mean, it would be easy to say, oh yeah, your discs are pinched. No, that's not what's causing your pain, because a lot of people have pinched discs and have no pain. Really what it is your behaviors. And so what I've been figuring out these last 25 years is how these behaviors are contributing to these common patterns of pain that we have.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And as you're walking me through this whole practice, my brain is going to all of my days of bartending. And I'm sitting there thinking and feeling exactly what I felt in those moments of standing behind, that counter for long hours, and specifically going into a very locked position to balance my weight to be as comfortable as possible. And ironically enough, majority of the pain that I have on my body all resides within the right side, from starting with my foot all the way up to this is where I hold most of the tension in my shoulder. And as a young child, I had a lot of younger brothers, and this happens to be the side of the body that I carried them, locked my hip on, and drugged them around for many, many years. So it's interesting as you're, walking us through this whole practice, all of this is flooding back to me going, oh, this is making so much sense now.
Well, can I put something together for your specific example then?
Absolutely.
Okay, Heather. So that was one pattern of pain, all right? And so that pattern of pain, I call an extension problem, where there's too much arch in the back or the back is too extended. It's not so much that the back is too arched, it's that you have too many forces trying to pull it into an arch. So where are those forces coming from? Well, the standing and lying down exercise taught us that those forces are actually coming from your legs. Specifically, the muscles, the thigh muscles, when they become tight, they tend to pull that pelvis forward and arch the back more. Even if your back isn't arched more, just the act of pulling the pelvis forward is causing stress, that pattern of stress to your back. Okay, so what you just described for your own case is what you probably have a right side bending problem. Is it your right side?
It is. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and I could check that out for you right now if you wanted to.
Oh yeah.
But basically, yeah. So this is the pattern that's behind most unilateral back pain. Back pain on one side of the back, or sciatic pain, or SI joint pain.
Okay.
So what happens is the pelvis is higher on that side, and the rib cage is typically lower on that side. And this is what I call a side bending problem. All right.
Yep, I got that. And you can see it physically with my rib cage. Like
I bet I could see it in a heartbeat.
Yes.
So typically, and if you're not sure if you have this, go ahead and take off your shirt, have someone take a picture of your back. And most people who have had this for a while will have a bigger crease on the side bending side than they do on the other side.
Okay.
And it's usually that crease is going to happen on the side that's painful for them. And that's because of this. So when you're in this pattern where one side of your pelvis is higher and the same side of rib cage is lower, you can imagine that it's compressing the nerve roots on this side of your back.
Yeah.
Well, some of those nerve roots are comprising your sciatic nerve. Okay. So, and that will contribute to sciatic pain. But also what it does is it creates a rotational torque in the pelvis that will cause SI joint pain as well. So this is what's really interesting about what you just said. You feel it all the way from your foot, all the way up to your head.
Yes.
So this pattern, let's say a right side bending pattern, why is this happening in the first place? It's usually due to some older unresolved injury on that same side of the body. So if you're feeling something in your foot, chances are you might have some old foot or ankle injury that hasn't been resolved well. So what happens is, over time, your brain starts hiking this pelvis up because it's trying to get off that old injury, right? And so it's tapping into a very deep and a very deep reflex that we're all born with, called a withdrawal reflex or a trauma reflex pattern. And so our brain over time pulls that pelvis up because it says, I don't really like stepping on that leg. Let me just get it off there a little bit, right? It makes sense. And the same muscles that are pulling the pelvis up are attached to the rib cage. Well, that then pulls the rib cage down. Or you've developed some weakness in that hip that causes that whole side to collapse. All right. So this is the root of the cause of your sciatic, SI joint, or unilateral back pain.
Right.
Now, how does that relate up to the head, though? Well, the center of function for the upper body system is the shoulder blade. You can, if you look at the architecture of that shoulder blade, it's broad and flat, just like one of our pelvic bones. We know that our pelvis is the center of function for our lower body and back system. Same thing for scapula for the upper body and neck system. So what happens is this shoulder blade has significant muscle attachments into the neck bones and the base of the skull. So when there's dysfunction happening here, it stresses one of those connectors, which is the levator scapula, which is a little pinky muscle down here that inserts into C1 through 4. Okay, so if we believe that the muscles attaching from the shoulder blade that insert into the neck and head are causing neck pain and headaches, and I can show you a really easy test to determine this. Knowing that the shoulder blade rests on the rib cage then is the next clue. Because now if your pelvis is up and your rib cage is lower, now you've offset the lower shoulder blade to be lower too, which is then going to stress those connections from the scapula into the neck and head even more. That's how it's all connected, from the foot all the way to the top of the head.
Makes total sense. And then to top it all off, I have extremely weak glutes. And so then, on top of that, it definitely contributes to everything that you were talking about is relatable. I'm like, yep.
Yes. Yeah. Very easily solved, by the way. Very easily. We can solve the side bending problem in about 30 seconds.
Okay. Tell me more.
Okay. So if you, let's say that you have a right side bending problem.
I do.
All you have to do is put your hand on top of your head or up in the air.
Okay.
And walk around for 10 steps.
Okay.
So what you're doing is you're breaking up the gait pattern that's contributing to this side bending problem.
Okay.
By having the arm up, now the rib cage can't fall.
Okay.
And if the rib cage can't fall, it's going to force the hip muscles to work the way they're supposed to work. Because when the rib cage is falling, it's accommodating the hip weakness. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So literally, if you walk with that arm up in the air for 10 steps, you'll find, and let's say you measure your pelvis before and rib cage before, and then after, it will level it off completely.
Wow.
Yeah, that easy.
So how often do you recommend I walk around with my arm up to try and get this? Because just having my arm in this position, I can feel all of the tension in that part of the shoulder, and it almost feels kind of good.
Yeah, it should. So if that feels like a bad tension, you can just put your hand on top of your head.
So for me, I think it feels less tension to have it straight up versus this position.
Exactly. Because the angle of the humerus or the upper arm bone is different, right?
Yeah.
Now it's higher, now it's lower.
Yeah.
So it's not stressing the shoulder joint as much.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're asked how often you have to do that. Well, you do it until you fix the reason why that's happening in the first place. Right?
Okay.
Which is that old ankle, knee, or hip issue. Okay? Or perhaps it's that your butt muscles are turning off.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't surprise me that your butt muscles are turning off because anyone who locks their knees, their butt muscles are turning off.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
So anyway, you'll do this until those issues are fixed. But really, this comes down to a gait problem. It comes down to a problem with how you're walking. And if your walking pattern is off because of some old injury, well, we have to fix that old injury to really solve this long term.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So what I'm hearing you say is that ultimately it starts with awareness, right? Having awareness around where the potential root cause is. Yes. And so once we have that awareness, then we have to break up the subconscious habit pattern. And by shifting the body into a different position, that can be the pattern interrupt to start getting us into a corrected state. Is that correct?
That's correct. Can I take you through a little example of changing that unconscious pattern?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is harder than you might think, but I'm going to show you what's at stake, what's going on here with your brain.
Okay.
So I want everyone to clasp their fingers together as if they're praying.
Okay.
All right, now look down and see which thumb is on top. Which thumb is it for you, Heather?
For me, it's the left.
Left thumb. Okay, so everyone has looked and see which thumb is on top. Now I want you to look up from your hand, look straight ahead, unclasp them, and reclasp them with the opposite thumb on top this time.
Okay.
Exactly. You had to practice a little bit.
Yeah,
now,
it feels really weird.
It feels really weird. So keep your hands like this for a little while I explain what's going on here.
Okay.
So you, Heather, had to try a couple times to get it right. And then I saw you sneak a peek down there to make sure that you got it right because you weren't sure. And your hand is right in front of your face, right? Yes. And let's face it, your hands are pretty well connected to your brain.
Right.
So if you can't control this simple change, think of what the rest of your body's like.
Right.
Okay. So there's a couple different things going on right now. One is that your brain is giving you an alert that says, hey, you're doing something different than what you've been telling me that I should be doing. All right. Then that's something else is going on though, too. The other alert in your brain is saying, this is wrong. So you're passing a judgment on something that is different, but your brain doesn't yet know that different thing could be exactly what you need to solve your pain. Your brain doesn't know how to solve your pain until you teach it, right? And until you teach and identify and change these unconscious habits, your brain is going to say, no, that's wrong. Nope, can't do that. That's not the way you've taught me to do it. So you've got to be ready when you look at these habits that you've ingrained in your brain and body over the years. You've got to be ready for alerts to come up that say something is different. And you've got to not judge those differences. In fact, in the beginning, if your brain is telling you something is different, it's probably a good thing because the normal way that you've been using your body is really probably what's hurting you.
Yeah. Man, Rick, this is like my brain is going crazy over here because as I'm hearing you talk, my brain's going to this place of this is why meditation and like things like yoga and breathing can be so challenging for individuals because it's not part of that subconscious integration of their normal daily habits. And so by trying to engage in those kind of, like just sitting here having my thumb over the opposite, I'm like, well, this is really weird. This is very different.
Yeah. And there's a judgment aspect to that too.
Absolutely.
Like, I can't wait to get out of this.
Yeah.
When will he tell me I can unclasp my fingers?
Right. Yeah. So now I'm going to have to make more of a conscious effort to do the opposite of what my natural state is.
Yeah. So what is your natural state? Well, we already talked about one of those things, locking your knees. Mm-hmm. Many people lock their knees and it's an unconscious habit.
Yeah.
And so, me telling you to unlock your knees isn't likely going to be enough.
Right.
That's why I say I put pieces of tape on the backs of people's knees so that when they straighten them, they get feedback from the tape and they're just like, oh yeah, there. And you wouldn't believe when the people come back in the class, they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much I've been locking my knees.
Yeah.
And now that they haven't, wow, my back feels so much better because of it.
Yeah. So for the average person who comes to see you and you do this little experiment or exercise with the tape, on average, how quickly can a person become consciously aware of this habit and have the ability to pattern interrupt as soon as they recognize they're doing it?
Almost within a day.
Wow.
And this is why, Heather, is because not only do they recognize that the pattern is happening, but they recognize that their back feels better when they're not engaging in that pattern.
Right.
That's the motivation,
mm-hmm.
right? That keeps them on top of this habit.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why, I hear a lot of physical therapists say, oh, patients just never do the exercises I give them. Well, that's because you haven't given them exercises that solve their pain.
Right.
They don't understand the connection between their pain and what you're telling them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Likely because it's not really solving the pain.
Right.
So this is why, I do retest with all my patients with everything. Is your pain better after doing this exercise? Yes. Okay, we're going to do that exercise. And then ding, 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 the light bulb goes off in their head and they say, yeah, because when I do it, I'm going to feel better. Mm-hmm. And if an exercise doesn't improve their pain and I can't modify it to make it work, then I say, you know what, we're going to come back to this one. I just want to give you the things that are absolutely going to help you. Mm-hmm. So if it's 2 exercises, anyone can do 2 exercises,
right?
So that's the thing that we're missing in PT is that we just tend to throw things at people. Mm-hmm. I've had people come in with, binders full of hundreds of exercises. Oh, this is what I'm just like, are you doing all of these things? And they're just like, oh yeah, all of these physical therapists and chiropractors and everyone has had me do all that. And why are you here then?
Right.
Oh, because I hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then we're going to throw all of these exercises out.
And now the person feels immediately relieved.
I feel better.
I just had like 10 pounds of weight come off my shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. I don't have to do that for an hour every day. No,
right.
You don't, because it's not working. Here's why you're having pain. And then we fix the systems.
Wow. I'm really impressed. I mean, you have just walked me through something that was what was feeling so complex. Feels very simplified and manageable. Like I'm sitting here thinking, I can walk around like this. I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do this.
That'll make your head and neck feel better, but it'll also solve likely this right-sided pain that you're having. But ultimately, you've got to fix the reason why that pattern's happening. Then you won't have to do this.
Right. But I think just being able to do this brings awareness that, there's something deeper here that I have to investigate and look into. So for most people, by the time that their body is presenting this pain, that's usually the red flag, right? That's being waved to say, hey, you're not paying attention. You're disconnected to XYZ, and we've got to resolve this issue. So in my opinion, this is where the pain continues to get more and more prevalent until it either debilitates us and puts us in a position where we have to address it. But unfortunately, it seems as if all of the ways we're being directed to relieve the chronic pain are not the actual solutions to get to the root cause.
Yeah, think of it like this. If you're at your parents' house and you drop food on the floor and left it there, your parents would say, hey, you dropped food on the floor. Can you pick that up? And then if you just kept walking over that food, your parents are going to say, hey, I said pick that food up. And pretty soon it's going to be a yelling match.
Right.
So that's what pain is. Mm-hmm. Pain is your parent trying to teach you that something is wrong about your body. Mm-hmm. And if you solve that thing, you'll no longer get yelled at anymore. Mm-hmm. And the pain is happening right now, just like that food that's on the floor that you haven't picked up yet. Mm-hmm. Until you pick the food up, that parent isn't going to stop yelling.
Right.
And that's what we're missing with component thinking.
This is so interesting because the other thing that keeps coming up for me is that this is all isolated to the right side of my body, which for me has a spiritual type of meaning and purpose to it as well. And the conclusion that I have come to personally is that I really lean into my masculine type of habits of trying to control and trying to perfect and being a problem solver. And so that was one of the correlations I had with all of this, particularly residing in the right side of my body. So can you talk a little bit about this spiritual component? Earlier, when we started this conversation and we were talking about the systems, this was one of the systems that you had mentioned that could potentially be out of alignment that is contributing to these pain problems. Would you speak a little bit more about that for me?
Yeah, but before I do that, and I promise I will, you used a term called I lean into it.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Mm-hmm. So I want to show you something about leaning into something.
Okay.
Or leaning away from something.
Okay.
More often. So you're sitting down right now. And folks, if you're sitting at home, do this test sitting. And if you're standing, then do it standing. It doesn't matter. So put your hand on your waist muscles at your sides.
Should my legs be crossed or uncrossed?
No, it'll be easier if they're uncrossed.
Okay.
So, and if you're just standing there, just stand there normally and have your hands on your waist muscles. They should feel a little squishy, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, most people with, let's say, right pain, you've got mm-hmm. right pain, right, mm-hmm. Heather?
Correct.
So unconsciously, your brain's saying, you know what? I think I want to get off of that. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if you shift over to the left side, mm-hmm. shift your weight over to that left hip, you'll notice that the right waist muscles contract more. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Those are the muscles that's pulling up your pelvis and pulling down your rib cage.
Okay.
And if you shift over to your right side, you'll feel your right waist muscles engage less and your mm-hmm. left waist muscles engage more. Mm-hmm. So the counterintuitive lesson here is that you've got to lean into that painful side if you have a side bending problem, because it's going to relax the muscles that are causing the side bending problem in the first place. Mm. But our brain says, no, I have to get off of that because it hurts. So your solution to get off of that pain is actually digging you into a deeper hole.
This makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's go on to the idea of psychological, emotional, or spiritual issues mm-hmm. causing pain, because I think this is a really fascinating one. And I described the pathway I'm about to describe in my back pain book. But have you ever heard of Thomas Myers? Do you know what fascia is?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Thomas Myers is a fascial researcher, and he identified certain superhighways of fascia that run through our bodies. Mm-hmm. One runs along the back of our bodies from the head all the way down to the bottoms of the feet. And then there's another that runs down along the side. There's a couple that run in the front. There's a rotational pattern. So fascia is connective tissue in the body. It connects everything to everything, muscles to muscles, muscles to bones. It holds our guts in place, everything. Mm-hmm. And in our body, in areas of mechanical stress, there's a certain type of fascia that's laid down called myofibroblasts that have 4 times the contractile capacity of normal fascia.
Okay.
And what that is laid down, I think, is to help brace that system to undergo that mechanical stress that it's under. Okay. So it turns out that when we become upset, so fascia, it doesn't respond to neurological input. It responds to chemical input. Okay. Cytokines that travel through our bloodstream, which are like hormones. Think mm-hmm. of them like hormones, just kind of circulating through our bodies. Mm-hmm. So when we're under stress, what happens is our brain releases a cytokine called transforming growth factor beta 1.
Okay.
So this is circulating in our bloodstream, and it tends to cause the myofibroblasts to contract.
Okay.
So if the myofibroblasts are laid down in areas of mechanical stress in our body, and we're under stress, those areas then are contracting up to 4 times greater than the other areas of our body because they're responding to that TGF beta 1, and they're in the areas of mechanical stress, which is one of the reasons I think why, we tend to feel pain up like in this neck area is one of the areas of mechanical stress. And anytime when there's a reversal of curvature in the body is an area of mechanical stress.
Okay.
So so when we're stressed or emotionally traumatized or spiritually struggling, that stress is circulating through our bloodstream and is honing in on these areas of mechanical tension.
Okay.
It's also additionally, I believe, contracting the other fascia as well along the whole pattern, but it's more centered on these mechanical areas as well.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. For you definitely helped me have a better understanding that these muscles aren't necessarily responding to the actual nervous system, that it's the chemicals that are being released from the perception of stress that the brain, is perceiving that it's under. So that's a pretty huge piece for me to unlock that. That makes a lot of sense.
That's my theory from putting together all this research that I've been uncovering over the years.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anyone say, hey, this is the pathway.
Right.
This is what I believe the pathway is.
Well, and I think that, as a practitioner myself, I think that this is where we have to just kind of trust that intuitive knowing, that information that's coming forth to us. And, we've been so conditioned to show me the evidence, show me the research. And unfortunately, I think that this has done quite a disservice to us, especially with detaching us or disconnecting us from that sixth sense, that intuitive knowing that we could all definitely use to strengthen that relationship. Most of us are just so disconnected from our physical beings that we aren't paying attention and listening to all the cues, all the signals, all of the flags that the body is giving us on a regular basis, that our attention is needed.
Yeah. And can I take this one step further?
Please do.
All right. So we have these fascial patterns that go from our head to our toe in different areas of the body and the myofibroblasts, which are laid down in areas of mechanical stress. So why might we have mechanical stress to these areas? It's because of how we use our bodies. So this is the thing that I've also been figuring out these last 20 years is how we're using, for instance, locking the knees when you're standing and walking is engaging this whole line of fascia along the whole back line here. And more specifically, it's going to engage those myofibroblasts in the lumbar area where when we did the test, we just felt that it was arching more, right? Because we were locking our knees. Well, part of that engagement is not only muscle engagement, but it's fascial engagement as well. So how we're using our bodies is causing these certain lines of fascia to become even more constricted and resistant to change. And so contributing to larger patterns of dysfunction in the body.
Wow. This is kind of an alarming conversation for me as we're sitting here and this is transpiring. I'm sitting here thinking we're kind of pioneers in a sense of almost this new way of using our bodies by not using our bodies, right? Because the reality is that over the last 40, 50, 60 years, our habits and behaviors as technology has advanced have shifted significantly, and we are underutilizing our physical bodies immensely. We have dysregulated all of our normal patterns, our movement patterns, our eating patterns, our sleep patterns. So the reality is we're kind of pioneering on this whole new surface of we have completely detached from the, what's the word I'm looking for? Just our innate patterns. We have just completely detached from these innate patterns. And we're going to have to do something significant in order to correct this pathway that we're on, or it's going to be pretty problematic. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And, the brain and body love movement. And the brain and body are one. What happens to your brain happens to your body. And what happens to your body happens to your brain. We have a somatosensory cortex in our brain that is mapping the entire body on our brain. So they're inextricably linked. And so the less we use our body, it's changing our brain, and not for the better. Right.
Yeah.
And so we don't have, I once treated a woman for a rotator cuff tear. She was a receptionist who typed at her computer, and she was going away on vacation. And when she put her luggage up in the overhead bin to leave for the beach, she tore her rotator cuff.
Oh, no.
Because she had never prepared her body to move like that. All the movement was below shoulder height. She didn't work out or anything like that, or do any kind of recreational exercise. And so her body was not prepared for that simple movement.
Wow.
And that's why just a little bit of movement, you don't have to change your whole world. Just a little, go out for a walk, but walk with your knees unlocked.
Which I think is something I'm going to have to be more aware of.
So go out for a walk. I mean, it can be so simple, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting, we have so many individuals who are suffering with depression and anxiety right now. They're seeking mental health alternatives as a way to relieve the depression and the anxiety. And one of the simplest things that individuals can do to help reduce depression and anxiety is just move their bodies. Many people are unaware that when we're not moving our bodies, we're not utilizing amino acids that are necessary to support muscle contraction and muscle movement. And therefore, our brains are competing against those amino acids that should be utilized through movement to be converted into neurotransmitters to help support our mood and our motivation and our, all of those behaviors and habits. So just moving the body can help support mental health by depleting a lot of those amino acids that are competing against the neurotransmitters to help support our mood.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people would say, but it hurts when I move. Okay. Do all forms of movement hurt? What about a recumbent bike and just moving really slowly and moving those feet, make them go around in little circles? Does that hurt too? What if you just walked in a pool? Would that hurt? I mean, your joints are completely unloaded. So start with something that doesn't hurt, or if it's going to hurts the least amount possible.
Right.
We've got to start somewhere to break this cycle of disuse and pain, because they're feeding each other.
Yeah, I love this. I absolutely love that you bring this up, because you are so right. That is the biggest rebuttal from individuals is, but I have too much pain to move my body. So really it's a matter of first determining, having the awareness to recognize where the pain is isolated, and then being able to set realistic expectations. Most of us have these grand expectations of what we can achieve in a short time. So being able to manipulate that and set those into a more realistic place based on what we can tolerate is a step in the right direction, is what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Yeah. And so, almost all lower body pain, including low back pain, has a large part to do with how you're walking. And so a lot of people come to me and they say, but I walk for 3 miles a day and I seem to always have pain. And I said, but you're not walking well. And so their walking is actually contributing to their pain, because it's not controlling their body the way it should, a normal gait pattern should. And so when I teach them how to walk correctly, now let's say if you walk 10,000 steps a day, you're feeding your back, or at least removing 10,000 hammers on your back every step of the way throughout the day. You wouldn't believe how much better that feels, because your poor walking habits are hammering your back or your hips or your knees or your feet or whatever that is.
Man. So tell me, how can people work with you? Can individuals that don't live in Colorado, can they get a consultation from you, or do you have to be in Colorado to work with you?
Oh, sure. In fact, I sold my clinic earlier this year.
Congrats.
Because, thanks. A, as you can imagine, I just got fed up with insurance.
Yeah.
And then B, I just felt like I was just so many people from all over the world had just started reaching out, and I created these home programs and stuff. And so I just thought, you know what, I'm going to make the world my clinic instead of just this little brick and mortar store.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I do telehealth visits
Okay.
with people. We can get a lot done.
Okay.
I don't know if my guy has sent you the Calendly link to that, but I have a Calendly.com link that you can schedule an appointment for me. So yes, but I've created the home programs recently because, you know, you shouldn't need not everyone needs my eyes on them.
Right.
And a lot of people who have chronic pain have just spent thousands of dollars on, you know, either surgeries or supplements or, you know, medications or, you know, procedures or things like that. So I create a really, I'm not supposed to use the word cheap, but they're very affordable, downloadable home programs, because the patterns that are causing most people, this is what I learned in my clinic these last 10 years, is that someone would come to me with back pain and another person would come to me with sciatic pain, another person with SI joint pain, but it was all the same pattern of dysfunction causing all of it, because it all fell along that same fascial pattern that we were just talking about earlier. And so the same thing, so how it's the same pattern is manifesting as different pain in different people, depending on their injury history, their genetics, their exercise history, their work habits, their psychological state, you know, their dietary, you know, all that kind of stuff changes how that pattern is going to manifest in one person versus another.
Right.
So so my home programs address the patterns that are causing everyone's pain, including walking patterns and things like that. Okay. So that's how I can make them simple and easy to follow.
Fabulous. So where can the audience find you? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, if you just go to www.rickolderman.com, it has all of my downloadable home programs. I've created an online training program for anyone from coaches up to surgeons, because I think anyone who deals with people with pain and movement needs to understand how this body is supposed to work to both create and fix pain. And then I've got a new book coming out this year.
It's hard to believe, right?
Yeah. And then there are some chapters you can read from it, and you can pre-order it there. I'd love to be the first physical therapist who is on the New York Times bestsellers list.
We can make that happen, my friend. I think that people are really, you know, seeking alternative solutions. They're sick of the pain meds. They're sick of having to go to their constant physical therapy with their hour, you know, worth of exercises every single night. So I think that people are desperate, and they're looking for solutions outside of the typical systems approach that we have become so accustomed to, that aren't getting us the results that we desire. So I really applaud you. I applaud your ability to go against the grain and really focus on the root cause to help, get people the relief that they are so desperate for, so that their quality of life can increase immensely just through their daily habits. That's such a beautiful gift to give others.
Thank you. Can I speak to the root cause for just a second?
Yes, absolutely. Please do.
All right. So one of the things that I've learned, so I was at one of the courses early on in my career that helped get me on this road to understanding systems.
Okay.
And I became friends with another physical therapist who was taking the very same courses I was. And at the end of all of these courses, it was like over the course of a year or something like that, I ran into him and I said, "Hey, how's this working for you?" And he says, "Eh." And I said, What do you mean, eh? This is like solving chronic pain. I mean, it's like amazing. And he says, "Yeah, but I'm a manual therapist, so I might just use this as a home program." And that's when I realized that all of us practitioners filter the information that we receive through our belief systems. This person believed that he should be able to solve all pain by manipulating a joint or massaging muscles or something like that. And so when I realized that, that's when I wrote my books 10 or 15 years ago, because I was trying to do an end around all of these practitioners whose belief systems don't include systems thinking.
Right.
And it's not surprising that they don't include systems thinking, because they've never been trained in systems thinking, right? We've only been trained to think component thinking works.
Mm-hmm.
And so, learning all of the all the practitioners that people have tried already may understand their component thinking approach very well.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in pain, it means that you're missing something. Your body's trying to tell you something's wrong.
Right.
I tell you, I mean, I'm not allowed to say 100% of the time, but 99.9% of the time, it's because you're missing a systems approach to understanding why you're in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking with a person, he says, well, what's the difference between acute and chronic pain? Well, some person came up with the idea that, any pain over 3 months is chronic pain. What? I have no idea why that is. But I tend to think of chronic pain as a prolonged acute condition that has never been resolved.
Right.
And so that acute condition can last decades.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't fixed your broken ankle, why would you ever expect it to be resolved 5 years from now?
Right.
So that's what chronic pain is. And I've just seen it so many times. Solve that acute condition and pain goes away.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know myself, I'm definitely interested in booking a consultation with you so that I can get to the root cause of everything that I have been experiencing on this right side. Because over the last 3 years, specifically with the beginning of the pandemic, that's where I've really started to see a consistent persistence in these symptoms. And I know that stress obviously has a root in all of it. But just to get your professional opinion and very specific exercises or, strategies that I can start to implement to resolve the problem. I'm ready.
I will tell you.
I am ready.
I'm happy to see you, via telehealth, but I'm telling you, everything I will tell you is already in my home programs.
Okay. All right.
I have not had a telehealth visit with anyone yet. And given them something that is not in my home program already.
Well, that's pretty amazing to be able to, state. So I truly appreciate that.
Sure.
Well, Rick, it has really been such a pleasure having an opportunity to pick your brain, to chat with you about pain today. You are an extreme wealth of knowledge. I love the fact that you are thinking outside of the traditional systems that have been implemented to typically, provide the assistance and support that individuals seek. So I commend you for your efforts, for your persistence in staying true to the cause and getting to that root issue so that people can start living pain-free lives. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Heather. Thank you.
It's truly been a blessing. And everyone, make sure you jump on Rick's website at www.rickolderman.com to get access to all of those regimens he has created so that we can start living a pain-free life.
Yeah, and if you type in Fixing You, all one word, FIXINGYOU, you'll get a 20% discount on whatever you buy.
Woo! Well, God knows in this inflated times, we can definitely use any discount possible, right?
Exactly.
Well, Rick, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And I look forward to connecting with you more. I'd love to have another conversation and dive even deeper into this if you're open to that.
Anytime.
Excellent. Thanks for listening to the Think Yourself Healthy podcast. Do me a favor, and if you loved this episode, please go leave a review. Reviews help make sure that this content reaches more people so that we can continue to heal as a collective. Remember to take a screenshot that you're listening and tag us on Instagram at Heather Barbieri RDN for a 15% discount on the Retrain Your Brain program. See you next time.